Hey guys, welcome back to the Book Haven with Rachel and Raven. We're so glad you're here. We've gotten a lot of great feedback, and we just really appreciate anybody who takes the time to just listen to our little podcast about books, because it is truly one of the highlights of our week to just get to sit down and talk about books because we love doing that. And we're just so glad that we get to do that with you guys. We're going to be talking about books that have been written from people who have come out of high demand religions, also cults. I have a particularly interesting perspective because I was raised in one of these. Some people call them high demand religions. I prefer to call them what they are, which are cults.
So how would you
No.
define high religion or high demand? Sorry.
High demand, I think, is just I think they're one and the same, honestly. Some people just want to call them a high demand because they're scared to say the cult word. It's scary. Um, they have a lot of rules that are man-made rules that are not biblical. A lot of times these cults grow from within, so there's a lot of intermarrying within this group, and that is like the one where I came from. There's not a lot of It's not my friend said it best the other day. It's not a go forth message. It's it's us for and no more kind of religion. Religion, cult. Anyways, yeah, so that's kind of how I would define that. The theology is a little, or a lot in some cases, really not correct from a biblical standpoint. You're really taking a lot of your belief system is just kind of what a man believes and what he kind of formed into this group or religion, air quotes. So, is that helpful at all? I
Yes.
feel like I kind of butchered that a little bit.
Nope, that was perfect.
So we're going to start off with talking about Jill Duggar's book, Counting the Cost. I really appreciated how she handled her story. I just felt like it was so filled with grace, but she did not shy away from telling the truth. And so, if you don't know who Jill Duggar is, her parents had a show on TLC, kind of following them along in their life because they had so many children. And the show was called 19 Kids and Counting. And now that some of these, the kids are getting older, I guess at least two of them are writing books and telling a little bit more of the behind the scenes, which when I was watching it, I never even thought about that. I just thought, wow, like there's this conservative family and like they believe in a lot of the same things that I believe in. And how cool is that? It's on TV, right? But as I got older, I started realizing, and as I got older and more things started coming out about their family, and that there is a lot of behind the scenes. And I could remember my husband being like, this is so weird. Why are we watching these people's lives? That's just weird. And now I see it. Now I'm like, yeah, that is kind of weird. So, I don't know. I appreciated her book. I feel like she wrote so much just from a place of grace and love for her parents, but also not being afraid to just tell the truth for what it was. And yeah, it just filled in a lot of gaps for me as well. She talked about her conflict with her dad, primarily with her dad. I don't think so much with her mom. But just how her dad kind of, he's just very, I feel like narcissistic, controlling in the way that he operates as head of his whole household. Like, I just appreciated her words in this book, and that it was not just a tell-all book and, like, let me bash my parents. I
Yeah.
think one of the phrases I think she used at the end of the book was, like, roses have beautiful flowers, but they also have thorns, and, like, they grow together in the same, um, like, bush, and so, there are roses and thorns, and it's painful to tell the truth of things that were done that were wrong, but that's still part of her story. She used another analogy, and I can't remember what it was. But two things can be true at the same time, and I think I really relate to that because while there were a lot of harmful things and a lot of um, brainwashing things that happened in my growing up years, there were good parts. There are still good parts that I look back on that I gleaned from those seasons or that season of my life, and have carried on into my adulthood. And yeah, so I don't know. You read the book too, Rachel. I feel like I
Yeah.
talked a lot, but what did you think about it?
Well, we have already talked about this briefly because we were super excited to talk about it. So, um, my one beef was the homeschooling thing, which I've already said in a previous podcast. But um, I think, like what you said, of two things can be true at one time, and you can have good and bad. I think that's what makes these kind of cults and um, religions appealing to people because there is some good mixed in with it. So, like, the Duggars putting out, like having a family and that being important, like that's not a bad quality to have.
Right.
Um, but it's when you take it to the, the 19th degree.
Yeah, literally.
um, and so you're pushing like this extreme now. I think I found it interesting in the book where she was talking about how basically the family and TLC was like having to come up with things for their family to do so that it would be appealing for the viewers, and like the pressure of them always having to seek out something that's going to draw people in. So she talks in the book about, having to film her births and stuff, which she didn't want to do.
Hmm.
Um, but her family kind of like, and the TLC kind of pressured her into it. And so they kind of come to an agreement, but there is footage of it. And then just, I think the most shocking thing to me, and Ginger talked about this in her book as well, about how the dad, Jim Bob, um, got them to sign that piece of paper,
Yeah.
which was basically a contract saying that they would work for free, um, for the show. And like if he was in charge of divvying out the money to them, but they never got anything. And I think that was interesting to find out later because before all of these like revelations came out, I would see um, Jess is on Instagram too. Like you would see them on Instagram and they're like trying not promoting things, but like hustling
Hmm.
and stuff, and you're just like, you have money, like, or that was my perception
Right.
of it, like, oh, they have money, they don't need to worry about it. And now come to find out that they weren't given hardly anything. I mean, I think he's given the money now after the fact, but like they weren't paid for any of that time. That's insane
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we have this perception of people too that I don't know. Like, yeah, I had the same thing. I just thought, well, they have money. What are they, you know, why? I think it was
Yeah.
joy. I'm like, why are they living in a old like RV at one point, um, while they fix up their house, you know?
Right, right. And that's
Um,
that's again too, like there are like the family had houses, and so when these like young kids were getting married, like they'd go live in this house for, way reduced rent. And there's good things that this family had, but there was also some really not good things. And I think that it's sad that you find it out after the fact, but like I can't think of a TV show family that has not just disintegrated after being on TV.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, like, it's the kiss of death.
Yeah.
And I actually know somebody that, she got approached. She likes to, do, like, let's just say HGTV kind of stuff,
Mhm.
um, decorating and that kind of stuff, and she got approached about filming, and she said no. She turned it down
Yeah.
because just I mean, I'm sure the money's great, but there's so much that comes with it that it's I don't know, it just kind of makes you question reality TV in general.
Yeah, it's true.
But
Yeah, I
so
think one thing that I found interesting though when this book came out is how little the sibling, like how like none of them did even promote her book. So I found that really interesting. That even Ginger kind of played that safe. And I think that goes back to like, this is just my theory here. I think they all signed like is it an NDA? Is
yeah.
that what that, um, like not speaking against the family or the show or anything.
Yeah.
And I think Jill's the only one, Jill and Derek are the only ones who didn't sign that. And
Well,
when
I also read an article, and this is probably gossiping if we want to label it, but it was saying that I think Jill, they were like interviewing her, and she was saying maybe, or a source, inside the family was
Mhm.
saying that they the kids were told to not talk to her, like since the book has come out, and if
Yeah,
they did, then they would be, you know, um, gonna lose their inheritance or something like that.
yeah,
And
and
after
that's not
reading the book,
shocking
like,
to me.
yes, after reading the book, it's totally not shocking,
Yeah,
but it's sad. It's really sad.
yeah,
So we
but
also wanted to talk about Ginger's book, which came out like, did that come out in the summertime or in the spring? I can't even remember now,
I feel like it was the spring.
but for sure 2023.
Yeah, yeah,
And Ginger's book is called, it's Ginger Duggar. How do you say her last name?
Volo.
Volo. And her book is called Becoming Free Indeed, My Story of Disentangling Faith from Fear.
Yeah. So her
And
book was very different from Jill's book. Jill's book is more of like the day to day, like what happened, like Jill's story of what happened. And Ginger's is more the spiritual side of it, the biblical, like breaking down the belief system of the religion that they followed or the man that they followed. I
which
don't
is the
know.
same, like if you watched Shiny Happy People,
Yeah.
the same Bill Gothard movement.
Hmm.
Yeah. So she really talks more about that that religious movement, not so much the family, like the inner
Right.
workings of the family. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I think the only like kind of controversial thing that she brought up was just about her changing the way that she dressed um, in that book. And really, that was just a very brief thing. I think she made a call to her dad and um, I guess gave him the heads up, right? Am I
Yeah,
remembering
I
that
mean,
correctly?
it's interesting to compare the two relationships because I feel like Jill, like with their dad, I feel like
Yeah.
Jill still tried very hard to show her dad in a good light.
Yeah.
Even with the choices that he made that ultimately have hurt her.
Right.
But Ginger very much painted it in the same, well, in a stroke of um almost like, would you say, like they didn't know any better. I felt like she kind of like gave them that pass. Like it's not their fault. They just didn't know that this was bad.
You
Do
mean
you feel like
Ginger?
that? Yeah,
Ginger said
Ginger.
that.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would agree with that. Yeah. Um yeah. So her book, I really appreciated her book for that reasoning and like how she talked about how it was not a deconstruction of her faith. It was disentangling. And I think when she used that terminology, I really liked that. That made sense to me because when I um, walked away and started that process myself, I knew that I didn't want to throw everything out. Um, I knew that I didn't want to walk away from God because my relationship with Him was like it was legit. So I wasn't wanting to get rid of that, and you know, I just needed help, like untangling what I had been taught, what was man's teaching, and what was what was God's teaching. And it gets and it's really hard. It's really hard to do that. So and it's like a big tangled mess. If I think of like if you've ever had a some jewelry that's gotten tangled up, it's really difficult, like necklaces and like
Yeah.
um, that kind of thing. And it's taking the time, and it takes time. It takes a long time to get that, you know, disentangled.
Yeah.
Um, so I really appreciated that from her and just the perspective of how she did that in the process. And I don't know, I felt seen when I read her book, um, Ginger's book, um, because I know that process, and it is a hard one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And don't you think that like um the way she went about writing that book was just you didn't feel like she was shoving down
yeah,
um like she really wasn't even like being mean to the cult or whatever you want to call Bill Gothard's movement. But
hmm,
she really wasn't even like bashing it. She was just like it's just not correct. So I felt like she did a very good job of not slinking mud and anything like that. And not saying that Jill did, but I think they're just two very different books. Two very different roads that they chose to go down.
yeah, I agree with that. I appreciate the different approaches that
Yeah.
they
I will
took.
say though, after after reading Ginger's book about her faith journey and whatever, it really left me kind of going, I really wanted to know more about the family. So when Jill's book came out, and
Yeah,
I think we both read that in like 24 hours, I devoured that because that was what I was wanting was to know like and Ginger kind of like alludes to stuff, but again, doesn't doesn't really get into the behind the scenes of the show, whereas Jill really does.
yeah,
And
and I think
again,
that goes back to like the I think Ginger had to play it safe because of I mean, personally, I think she still has an allegiance to
probably.
yeah, to the
Yeah.
family. So that's just me being, I guess, speculative or whatever.
Well, I mean, that's all we can be.
All right.
But yeah. So I think if you're going to if you want more about the show, you should read Jill's. If you want more about the way the like the faith of the family of the Duggars, then I would
Yeah.
read Ginger's. Or you could just read them both and then
Yeah.
compare.
Yeah, because
But
they are two very different books. Just keep
yes,
that
they're
in mind.
just
Like,
two very different books. Yeah.
yeah.
But if you like this kind of thing, that you could explore other books that are kind of in the same vein as these two books are.
Hmm.
So, do you want to give them your one of your recommendations?
I really just have one, and that would be Educated by Tara Westover. It's a very different, and it's been a few years since I've read it, but it's really kind of a lot about her family. But it was just a very controlling atmosphere. And I don't know if you don't know who Tara Westover is, she ended up um, getting out of there and going to college and getting, I don't know what degree she got. She got some degrees. Um, and that she wrote this book. Like, she went from barely being able to like read and write to actually being able to write her story in yeah, in book form. And it's, I don't know, it's pretty interesting book. It's very intense. There are a lot of intense moments in there. I would probably put a lot of like trigger warnings on that book.
Well, I was
Um,
just thinking, we should probably just say going into all of these books that there's gonna
that's
be
true.
some sort of trigger warning.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, even Jill's, first of all, like if you know anything about Jill's story, she does not go graphically in depth. Okay, she does a very good job of, what is happening, but she doesn't, you know, get graphic with it. Would that be a good fair way to say that?
Yeah, well, I think
Would you
we're
agree?
talking about the situation with her brother. So if you
Yes.
don't know what happened, like, you can go look it up. I'd be very careful, but,
Yeah, be careful.
Josh Jugger is now in jail for, like,
12
child
years.
pornography like,
Yeah.
charges. So, you definitely want to be, um, like, careful when you're looking him up if you choose to do that, but so that's definitely gonna be something that comes up in the book, but she doesn't go on and on about it. But I
Right.
think most of these books probably have some sort of level of abuse, in all different forms.
Yeah.
So you definitely, if that's something that, triggers you in a certain way, I would definitely look more into these books before you pick them up.
Right.
Or you could send us a message on Instagram or leave a comment in the YouTube comment section, and we could, like, respond back if you have a particular question about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And in Tara Westover's book, I will say that it's pretty like it's very intense in that book, the abuse that takes place and just a lot of really hard things. So, a high trigger warning on that one. Um but yeah, I felt like it was worth the read. I think it's always worth standing in someone else's shoes and experiencing from a different person's perspective, if you can handle that.
Yeah.
It makes you have a lot more compassion for people because we don't know what people have walked through in their lives. So,
Yeah.
okay,
And when we were talking about Ginger's book and disentangling, it made me think of Another Gospel by Lisa Childers.
yeah, because we read those kind of close together, didn't we?
I mean, Elisa Childers has been probably a couple years now.
Oh, I guess that's true. I just have fond memories. So,
Ah, time passes.
yeah,
But
right.
do you wanna tell them about that one?
Another gospel.
Yeah.
Yes, if you haven't heard of Another Gospel by Elisa Childers, if you haven't heard of Elisa Childers, you need to go and subscribe to her podcast and her YouTube channel, her Instagram, like just follow her. Um, but Another Gospel kind of goes through her, like, she kind of had a faith crisis. She did have a faith crisis, and she didn't want to throw it all out. She didn't want to deconstruct. And so she wrote this book and basically kind of telling her story, um, of how she just went back to the truth and just started, you know,
Yeah.
what would you say, Rachel?
I
Like,
would say that
like,
it's I would say it's very much in the same vein as Ginger's book
yeah,
of, like, I didn't wanna get rid of my whole faith, but I did have to walk this journey of figuring out, like, what was true versus what other men of churches and whatever
yeah,
had, like, injected into this false teaching.
yeah. And it's really good. And it will really encourage you just to even just dig into the word and really, what do you believe? What is the truth, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like she does a good job of not telling you what to believe, but
Exactly.
encouraging you to, like, you if you're gonna take the time to believe something and go to church every week and all that kinda stuff, you need to know why you believe that and what the truth
Yes.
of that actually is.
Yes.
So
I love that.
so my nonfiction recommendations, because we know that I read some crazy things. So over the years, I went back in my Goodreads to pull up some. I read Escape by Carolyn Jessup. Yes, that Jessup. If you know anything about the polygamy world, um, I'm trying to, like, is it just, what are they called? Fundamentalist Mormons?
Yeah.
Okay. So the Jessup family ran that group and had, a gajillion wives, each guy. So this was one of the wives. Um, and I can't remember which Jessup guy she was married to, but got married. I if I'm remembering correctly, at a very inappropriate age, and had kids, and ended up leaving the like escaping. Hence the name of the book, Escape. Um, but it's the same vein of like her coming to terms with like, I don't think what I'm believing is true
Mhm.
anymore. I think there's been added stuff, and then trying to figure out, how do I get out of this, and how do you build your life um once you walk away, when you're walking away from literally everything that you have ever known.
Yeah.
Um so that one's really good. And then another one that I just read, I think this year, because I think it just came out this year. It's called A Billion Years by Mike Rinder, Rinder. Um, it is so very interesting. So he was raised in Scientology. Um, and I know Scientology is like kind of like super secretive, but he lays a lot of what they think out there, and a lot of what they do when you're raised in this church. And it was super, super fascinating. Um, it's not a small book, but it is worth it. I don't think, like, I don't know that he's religious anymore. Um, like, I think he totally stepped away from everything, but it was just fascinating to listen to him talk about read, talk
Mhm.
about leaving, and again, coming to the realization of like, stuff's not lining up so much anymore, and then
Mhm.
walking away. So, those are our nonfiction recommendations. But if you like fiction and are interested in this topic, I do have some books for you too. So,
Yes.
um, one of the books is called The Book of Essie, and it's by Megan McLean Weir. Um, and all of the books are linked in the description of either the podcast or the YouTube video that you're consuming this on. But um, I read this book a couple of years ago. You read it too, and
I did read it,
okay,
yeah.
and it was so fascinating. Like, I just remember devouring it. So it's basically the Duggars in fiction form. So it's kind of like, I would say, loosely based on what this author thought that was probably going on, but
Yeah.
totally making it a whole different family and whatever. It
That part
is,
was really interesting to me because I think we were still watching the Duggars back by like, around that time, or at least, like, I had let my kids watch a few of them,
yeah,
and this is before anything, and, yeah, and then reading that book, and I'm like, "This is weird." Like, it's
like, it
really
really
weird.
started making you question, like, I wonder really what is going on behind the scenes, because basically
Yes.
that book is just what's going on behind the scenes of this TV family, from this one daughter's perspective.
Mhm.
Um, so it's super fascinating. And then I just finished this book, and it's called Lay Your Body Down, and it's by Amy Suter Clark. And it sounds, I don't know that I love the title of this book, because it kind of sounds like, questioning what it's about. But again, it's about this girl who left this, what did you call it? High demand
High demand
church,
religion.
um, and moves away, and then she ends up coming back to town because somebody has died, from the church that she grew up in. And so she goes back, and she ends up trying to figure out like what actually happened. So it's kind of a mystery, um, suspense, but it it was, I really enjoyed it. I found myself like wanting to get back to it to see what was going to happen. So Those are my 2 fiction recommendations, kind of in the same vein of this quote unquote cultish.
Yeah, and I was actually surprised because I thought the Lay Your Body Down was an actual retelling of someone's story. Um, and
No.
I'm still kind of taken off by that. Like, what?
But she writes it in a way of, like, making it seem, legit,
Yeah,
but, like, that it's a true story or something, but it's not, it's fiction. But it also I think it's much more in the sense of, like, murder mystery kind of feel to it with the like, taking place in a world where it's, like, dealing with church people, if that makes any kind of sense.
yeah. I'm intrigued.
Yeah. So, if you want to go down the road of all of these books, let us know if you choose to do that. And like Raven said, we just um I had a complete brain fart.
You have to leave that in.
Yeah. We
Leave a
really
comment or contact us on Instagram if you have any like questions and you want to go down this. It is a wormhole. I'm going to tell you, it's a wormhole because you will run across some crazy belief systems. Like
yes.
diving into this, world of. There's another one, and I'm trying to think of the name of it. Oh, Passport to Heaven. That is one. That's a great one. Um,
I'm trying to
so
remember what group is that?
it's Mormon.
Okay.
Yeah. But like mainstream Mormonism.
Yeah.
Um, that one is a really good one. And that his testimony is like, it is so interesting. But yeah, if you want another like actual, person telling their own story, his is really a great one. Um, but yeah, you will encounter some weird stuff. I'm just saying.
That's Mike Wilder that wrote Micah, sorry, excuse me.
Micah. Yeah, I was like, I
Micah,
know his name's Micah.
Passport to
Yeah.
Heaven, yeah.
Yeah, and I believe his mother wrote a book too.
She
But yeah,
did,
and
but
I
I
can't
don't
think of her name.
I know, I can't.
But that one's a really great one. But just know that people believe some interesting things.
Yeah, and again, like, I'm sure Elisa Childers said it in, like, a way more beautiful way, but if you are feeling like you're maybe questioning some of the things that you're believing or going
Hmm.
about doing in your church, you really need to investigate for yourself what are the reasons behind, um, the different things that your church does, and make sure that you agree with them 100%.
Yeah, yeah. We're
So
not talking about secondary issues. We're talking about like the meat, right? Like the core stuff.
right, right.
So, you know, really, really, yeah. We could make a whole podcast
We
about
could
that.
just end on just re read your Bible.
Read your Bible. That's the best book that you could read.
Okay, thanks for listening, guys. If you could do us a favor and either like and subscribe and turn on the notification if you're watching or listening to this on YouTube. And if you're listening on Spotify, if you could give us a good rating so that other people can find our podcast, that would be great. And don't forget, you can follow us on Instagram for all sorts of weird, funny, random reels or Instagram stories for your
Yes.
entertainment. So